Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I want to talk about the latest as we move into the final days of the transfer window. A busy one for Manchester United, one of the best windows we've seen in a long time for a lot of reasons, not just the ins, but the outs, as well as the age profiles and the sort of intelligent approach that has been done while also following a very club-led, scout-led, and data-led approach to recruitment. We're obviously going to see how that pays off in the end, because it's easy to rate a window when you're in it, but it's all about how you perform once the players are in the door and actually stepping on the pitch. But given that Mazraoui is the only player who so far has started, and I think has done really well, so far so good. So we're going to talk today about Ugarte, when that's going to be announced, Scott McTominay, his deal to Napoli. We'll very briefly on those. We'll talk about Jadon Sancho. That's the main story as we move into the end of the window in terms of what is unresolved, as well as Raheem Sterling and United's overall potential approach to the PSR situation, to space that they have and all of that. So let's get right into it. First and foremost on Manuel Ugarte, obviously he flew in Tuesday night late. And then as I understood it yesterday, he was prepared for his medical. He had his medical. He's all wrapped up essentially. But may not yet be announced today even. Could be tomorrow. And that'll be because of the Scott McTominay deal. Ugarte has not had a full preseason. He had a full preseason with Uruguay, a deep run in the Copa America, played a lot. So he's probably in good shape. He just had his few weeks off. He's been training on his own, though not with the team. Doesn't have any match fitness, but at the same time, he also is an incredibly robust and physical and fit player, and I would expect that he will be fine. I don't believe he will start right off of the bat for United, though. It just tends to not be how we do things. I would expect we get him in. It'll all be done before the deadline and the registration deadline and all of that. And then he will be on the bench for Liverpool. And maybe get some minutes, depends on the game state. But I'd be very surprised if he doesn't go, take a little bit of time to bed in and work with the team. Of course, then he'll probably be gone during the international break. But at least he'll get some match fitness and some team training and all of that, come back, and he should be all ready to go following that. So hopefully we see him sooner rather than later. It's obviously a bit of a pain in the ass that he's just not quite, we want to get him in early. I would love to see him start against Liverpool, I guess, but the odds are lower and lower all the time. Though he's there, he's working, he's fit, hopefully. I guess it depends on their assessment of him over the next couple of days, but it's a tough game to come into. Scott McTominay. Now, part of that, very funny, is 2 years ago, after a tough first couple of games, and including a loss to Brighton, United brought in Casemiro, and they had a game against Liverpool. And Casemiro did not start in that game. Scott McTominay did, with Eriksen in the midfield. United won that game, surprisingly, as well with Jadon Sancho, another subject of discussion that we will have today. Funnily enough, it was the parallels and differences are very amusing 2 years on between how things were and how things are now. Scott McTominay, yesterday his contract and everything was still going through the legal stages, so he hadn't traveled yet. Today he arrived this morning in Napoli to sign for them. Now, the reason why there's a little bit of a delay on both ends here is that, of course, the deal for Ugarte in its present structure of a permanent 50 plus 10 million euros deal is heavily reliant on Scott McTominay's deal getting finalized with Napoli. United need that sale at the agreed cost and for it to all go through in order to be fully compliant and in the shape that they want to be from a financial perspective for Ugarte. So I have the expectation that based on certain pieces of things and the way that United do things, that Scott McTominay will need to kind of finalize and sign his contract with Napoli before we can announce Ugarte. I don't know about officially announced because it depends how they do their announcements, but it needs to be wrapped where United can file it and say, good, he's sold. It's done. We can put it in there. Now let's get the Ugarte thing on the books, and be sure. So there's no issue with that. It's all fine, but that's just why it may take a little bit more time. They'd want McTominay's deal to reach a certain stage to be that there's like no chance of a fall through before getting it on their books, just out of safety, and just because it's just how it is. So not a problem, but that's why it might take a little bit longer for the announcements and all of that to occur. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Ugarte is a Manchester United player, and I'm very excited about. Scott McTominay obviously departs, 30.5 million euros, 10% add-on, sell-on clause rather. I think United got an incredible deal on this, really. I honestly do. I think it was a good one. And as I said, Scott was very, very much open to the idea of Napoli to work with Antonio Conte, a big coach, top coach, and a top club, a club that is a prestigious. The money is going to be good there. He's definitely getting a pay rise to go to Napoli as well. So a good move for him. And it obviously shows a bit of the difference, the way that United are approaching these things nowadays under the new leadership. I've said this before. I said it on a live. I've been misquoted on it. I've gone round and round about it. But I stand by this incredibly strong. I know it to be true. I'm not the only one who said it. If you go back to late June into July, on the discussion of Manuel Ugarte, David Ornstein specifically said that there was not total agreement within the club on going for Manuel Ugarte, that everybody was not totally in accord on going for Manuel Ugarte. Then you've had reports from Laurie Whitwell, others as well as myself, that Erik ten Hag wanted to keep Scott McTominay. This doesn't mean he didn't want Manuel Ugarte, because I saw some people saying, well, if he didn't want Manuel Ugarte, then he's not going to play him. That's not what I said. I want to make this very, very clear. Early on in the window, based on the finances United were looking at prior to certain sales, because at the start of the window, bear in mind, the window didn't necessarily go according to the exact plan. That doesn't mean you don't expect it to go according to the exact plan. You have a lot of different contingencies and things set up. The idea was a striker, a center back, or two, and being able to move some center backs on. Well, they haven't even been able to sell Lindelof. They were aiming to get cheaper center backs in. They thought they'd spend a little bit bigger on Braithwaite, that Euro would be very difficult, and that they would be able to get someone like Todibo in on the cheap, or Tosin on a free. And so they expected to spend a bit less at center back, and get a striker, and then move on to the midfield. But the midfield was also going to require some sales at the time. And if you look at the deal now, even getting it done in a permanent required the sale of McTominay to put United in the financial position they wanted to be in. Now, they were going to get it done regardless in terms of a loan plus obligation in the end, but this was the ideal. So early on in the window, the discussion was, well, they didn't want to go A, then B, then C, like we've seen under the Glazers, where we have to wait every step of the way for the next step. So we were moving on a lot of things all at once, even though it took a little bit of time to get everything over the line. And the discussion was, what do we do here? What do we do in this area? We have Scott McTominay as a saleable asset. Do we push him out the door? Because we're not getting interest in Casemiro. That's the problem. It was supposed to be Casemiro to go, and that was going to fund Ugarte. And then you wouldn't have a conflict over McTominay. He could stay, he could go, whatever. He wanted to discuss his future. But with no interest in Casemiro, it presented a problem, which was, okay, we can't do that. Scott's the only other real saleable asset in there. Eriksen doesn't do much for us. He's not really worth anything. He's got a year left, and it's going to be difficult to fetch anything for him, and we probably have to pay off some of his wages. That's why he hasn't gone yet, because the costs are too high, even though there's interest in him. He's expensive. It's more likely he could just go for free next year, and it would suit him better and suit, the clubs that he would sign for better. So this was the problem. Ten Hag wanted to keep McTominay, and he wanted to bring back Amrabat. Now, I've said since practically April, I think, that Sofyan Amrabat was not going to sign permanently for United, and I had not heard of any plans to do so. And as I've said before, where I get information from, the directness of it is not, it's from certain areas that haven't always gone to plan in the past. This year they went better to plan. We went for most of the scouted targets, most of the targets that they have analyzed and that they've looked at and that they've watched. And whether now or even a year ago, like in the case of Ugarte, or for many years, like in the case of De Ligt, they are all actual targets the club really liked. But they did not want Amrabat. But the discussion was, okay, if we can't move Casemiro, we could get Amrabat back and keep McTominay, or we could get Ugarte. And there wasn't total agreement on which one would be better. The club really strongly did not want to bring back Amrabat. The club looked at it and said, we don't want it, with the problem with McTominay as well, is he's on this expiring deal. We don't think we want to give him a new contract, so it's the right time to sell. You lose some of the goals from him, and I think that was where Eric's consideration was. And I think that's why you saw talk of yet another attacker, a striker rather, which doesn't totally make sense. We've never really ended up going for another striker after Xerxes. But you can see where some of these kind of threads all tied together. As it went on and it became clear that United could potentially get a deal done on a loan, they pushed ahead with Ugarte before it was decided whether Scott was going to go, whether they had any offers for him. And they said, good, he can go, but we're going to hold out. There were some pretty intense discussions between Ten Hag and the club, and the other members of the leadership team about what to do with McTominay. And in the end, they all agreed that he would go. But that did not happen until very recently. And so there was delay on this. There was disagreement within the club on how to move forward in all of this. But that's part of that is just it's healthy having opposing and different viewpoints in something like this, and different opinions, and having a little bit of tension that allows you to come to a proper decision. So none of this is intended to take as like this huge negative, but it is a reality that there was tension over the plan, because initially the plan was McTominay or Amrabat, and then McTominay and Amrabat or Ugarte, and there was some disagreement there over what was the best idea. So anyway, we moved on. I think we've gotten to the right solution. I think everybody's on the same page, and I think that it's a far, far better outcome than what it could have been. And I'm very, very happy it got done. And that's part of the reason why they looked at cheaper options, guys like Sander Berge, because they could potentially have gotten him in without moving on Scott McTominay as well. So anyway, there was a lot of talk over it, a lot of potential compromise, a lot of things that happened to try and work this out, and in the end they did. McTominay goes to Napoli, and Ugarte comes in, and this new leadership team are pulling no punches on moving players on who are not there. They've done most of what they've wanted, and we'll look at the whole team in a minute. Following up on that, Jadon Sancho. This has obviously been a saga, a long saga. He came back. He's training, as I've said before, and I want to make this very clear. If Jadon Sancho doesn't leave, he will remain with the first team and train. He has not been cast out. There is no blow up. He went through, talked to the proper people through the proper channels in the proper way, in a professional manner that is expected and what people wanted, in order to ask to leave and say that he would prefer a move away. I think people will take it all the wrong way. And the reason I'm saying all of that is because there's a decent chance Jadon Sancho is still here at the end of this window in a couple of days. In fact, it might be the more likely outcome that Jadon Sancho remains at Manchester United. Okay? It might be, because there were people jumping the gun on Juventus yesterday. United have really strongly wanted a permanent. That's been the issue. That's been their stance all along. If Jadon Sancho's to leave, we want it to be a permanent deal. Could they, in the end, not panic, but say, all right, fine, screw it. We're just going to take a loan with a good fee, plus some wages covered, and that at least reduces our expenses this year, and he goes out, and we'll deal with it again next year. Could they, in the end? Yes. Will they? I don't think so, personally, based on the way that they've approached this whole time. You've heard it from me. I've seen it from Simon Stone. I've seen it from 5-6 other top journalists that, they want a permanent if he's to leave. They really don't want to pay for him to play somewhere else. It doesn't do anything for him. and he's with the first team. He's not cast out, So, and there's a lot of games. You start getting injuries, you start needing these players to be available. So yeah, it's all been approached well, and as much as Jadon Sancho hasn't really worked out at United, I'm not saying he has. I'm not defending even anything that's happened. I'm simply saying there's nothing actually wrong with how it's been gone about by him or anybody else this summer right now. He returned. They put it behind him. He would prefer a fresh start. United would prefer a fresh start too. There's a lot of benefit to that. So if that happens, fine. So Juventus have only offered at this point this loan with maybe an option. Even that is unclear as to whether they've actually presented that beyond just a significant loan. United have, I think, said the option is sort of meaningless to us. It needs to be an obligation or something that turns into an obligation easily. You've seen reports of this. It has been discussed. And United and Juventus were in talks yesterday over the nature of what an option or an obligation might look like, but they have yet to reach a positive conclusion on that. The player himself, Jadon Sancho, would like to return to London. I think we spoke about this for last month or so, that it wouldn't be surprising if Chelsea came in and that's where he wanted to go, because they did this last year. Joe Shields came up and it was a part of sort of the blow up and was in contact with his representatives. And that might happen again. And look, and here we are. And it seems like, that Chelsea might be presenting more of an option. But of course, a big part of that would be them needing to swap Raheem Sterling in order to get this done. So it's very much up in the air because United have not decided to go for Sterling yet. In order for Sterling to happen, he's also going to have to sort out big wages and pay off with Chelsea. United are not going to pay him $300,000 a week. They're not going to pay $40 million for him. They'd want to get a really good fee for Sancho. $30 million, I believe, at the minimum. And they wouldn't want to have a significant fee for Sterling, and they'd want it to be on a short-term deal that's more in the range of maybe $150,000 a week. And in that way, they could see it as a viable deal. I did a whole video on PSR stuff, and it also explained how the Sterling deal in this kind of swap for Sancho on the terms United would want would significantly benefit United and even allow them to get another player. Probably not this summer, but next. So yeah, there's a lot up in the air on this. The discussions between Sancho's representative is doing a lot of the talking in between the clubs as well. But discussions have kind of in context have continued with Juventus. United are deciding what to do with Chelsea, but Chelsea have to sort it out with Sterling too. There's not a lot of time left. And so given all of that, right now, there's not a viable deal yet to take Sancho away from United. And so that's why I said it may be more likely right now, my read on it, that he stays at United moving forward. That's my read on it because there's just nothing there yet. Juventus could pop up with his offer at any point in time, but that is actually suitable. United could change their mind and say, okay, fuck it, let's go. Let's go. We'll just send him on loan. But I don't think they will, because I think they'll feel they're short if they do that without the ability to bring somebody else in. And that's also why the Sterling thing would be under consideration. Now, if it was an obligation, you might be happier to be a little bit short, because then you could even spend in January if you had some injuries or anything happen and you needed to get somebody in the door. But Sterling, why would they consider it? Now, I looked into some stuff on Sterling, and I've got to tell you, here comes the gaslighting, okay? I was surprised by the positivity of it. And looking at it, it's statistical. I've watched a lot of Raheem Sterling over his career. A lot of us have. There are very much things to be frustrated with Raheem Sterling. There's no doubt about it, right? We know that. There are things to be very frustrated about with Raheem Sterling. But what are the positives, and why might they consider it? Number one, obviously, Rashford has not been informed for a while. Number two, none of our wingers, frankly, have been proven goal scorers for a long time. Raheem Sterling scored last year 8 goals in the league. Now, I think that would have him above all of our forwards last year in the league, right? Yikes. But when you look at the stats, there's a couple of things that stand out. Number one, recoveries in the opposition half. Raheem Sterling has always been a very solid, very successful, very energetic presser. That's something that is a positive. He's been a good dribbler on the ball. He's good getting into the box. He's created a lot of XG, a lot of chances. He's progressive. He has good assists. He has decent goals. His shot conversion, I think, is the main problem, right? That he misses a lot of chances. When you look at here, he missed 11 big chances. That's pretty bad. His overall percentage on conversion isn't bad. But look, 4 assists, 8 goals as a winger in the Premier League. It's not that bad, all things considered, statistically, playing in that Chelsea team. Am I saying that I want Raheem Sterling? Not necessarily, but I'm much less opposed to it than I was in the past. He's a good presser. He wins the ball at a fair clip. He's not that successful of a dueler. But Raheem Sterling is a good player. He's better than he's getting credit for. As a depth winger, I think he'd be a very good player. And I think if United could get him on the terms that they would want, he would be a good player. I think he would represent, you play him in cup games, you could play him in Europa League in your rotation, bring him off the bench, then I think he brings an option. I understand why a lot of people would be opposed to it, so I'm not trying to shove this down anyone's throat, but I do think he's a potentially better signing than he's getting credit for. Again, it would have to be on the terms, of course, that United are discussing. It would have to be on a shorter term contract on decent wages that actually justify the type of player that he is, the age, all of that. I've seen people compare it to the Alexis Sanchez thing. Come on, it's kind of ridiculous. First of all, I think Alexis Sanchez was quite a bit older, but secondly, maybe he wasn't quite a bit older, but he did come on like $500,000 a week in wages, and that was the big problem with Alexis Sanchez. And on a longer contract. On a short-term deal on lower wages, it's not that similar in the slightest. And I don't think United will do something stupid. That they obviously haven't so far, and I don't think they're going to mess this up. But I think they're considering it. They are considering it. They have been considering it. They have been discussing it. But I think they want to see that it's on their terms, and that Chelsea would really need to come up with the proper payoff and agreements between them and Sterling in order to make it happen on a way that would work for United, because it's not going to happen just under any conditions. It has to be right. But otherwise, I think it's becoming more likely that or Sancho stays than it is Juventus even in the last little bits, simply just because Juventus have not come up with a decent offer, and maybe they can't. I don't know what their deal is, quite honestly. I really don't know what their deal is. It's crazy, but yeah. Hopefully they do. The talk continue, very much up in the air, but obviously it's going to go down to the wire. We've got just over 24 hours left, right, to have a deal get done. And and you can submit and things can be finalized afterwards, but we've got just over 24 hours for someone to sort this out and see what can happen. So we'll see very soon there what happens. Probably today, I would imagine today we find out whether Juventus are going to make this deal or whether we will make the decision to move forward with the swap with Chelsea. Finally, lastly, I want to look at the team again. Oops, wrong button. I want to look at the team and say, this is, as I see it, if we made that Sterling swap and that was our business. And beyond that, there's for sure very unlikely to be anything else. This is our first 11. Now, depending on injuries, obviously there's a few injury things, but I think De Ligt will be for now the starter before Lenny Yoro for a little while. We looked at this a little while ago when it was looking like this is what would happen. Now on paper, to me, this is an incredible first 11. Very balanced, great age profiles. 27-year-olds, a few of them, right over here. And then young players, the rest 23 and under, right? Well, left side is kind of like, left side to Bruno is all 27, and then it's like, or 27 to 28, and then it's all like 23 and under. And that's kind of interesting, but, a really strong profile here, I think, on paper, a fantastic team that can develop and improve in the future. by not making big further signings, United have left themselves a lot of room for next summer. And I did a whole PSR explainer video. I think very much worth watching. I think very, very much please watch that so you understand what United are doing, how they're lining things up, and how next summer could be massive. Now, when you look at this, you would say, okay, well, what are the major areas of concern? Well, there's obviously the evaluation of how each of these players play. We'll get to that in a second. But here, I think you have a concern. Your midfield is old behind Kobbie Mainoo and Manuel Ugarte. It's quite old. Eriksen, Casemiro. You have Collier there. You have Kone, who they've signed. Sekou, the Mali international. But the age, they're not ready. They may not be ready. They may not. We don't know on that yet. You need at least one more really good player in here, right? Positive of Ugarte and Bruno, incredibly robust, never get injured type players, but you need at least one more good player in here. You really do. So that'll be a huge focus for next summer. We've spoken about that before, about Adam Wharton and potentially other ideas. This is a huge focus, getting somebody in here, and they'll have the space to do it. This is a problem. Luke Shaw supposedly back after the international break. For how long? We need a left-footed left back. If you watch me, I know people disagree with me about how much it affects our forwards. I disagree with you extremely strongly about that, and I always will until we have a left-footed left back playing down that left side. No matter who we stick on the wing, they will struggle. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. And I stand by that strongly. And we may make changes in the forward line this weekend and beyond. We totally might. And I'm happy to see it if we do. But without swapping either Mazraoui over here, who's better with his left foot, or getting somehow a left-footed left back in here, it is going to struggle on that left side in most games. But anyway, on paper, very good if Shaw is healthy, but we can't rely on him. Malacia still might be a bit away, and then we still don't know, though he's finally back kind of training a bit normally, but not with the team. We need a left back. So I think that is a priority for next summer, unless Luke Shaw is miraculously healthy all year. Then that would be a major priority for next summer with names like Kirkes, Ait-Nouri, and others, right? So those are the two main priorities. In the center back contingent, it's pretty good. Harry Maguire could end up staying longer depending on the season that he has, but if not, moving him on and get Braithwaite would be the ideal scenario for United. So those are your three major areas where you say, regardless, just due to ages and injuries, we have to change. Then, of course, the big evaluation is in the attack. Do our wingers kick on? Does Rashford get back into the shape that he was in before? Is he able to have a solid season? Do Garnacho and Ahmad continue their steps forward in their progressions? Because they're young and they still have a lot more to go. So does he get back into form? Do they progress further? Do our strikers kick on a bit as well? Based on that, that's going to be incredibly performance-based through the year as to whether they go spend money here next season or not. Very, very performance-based. Very much contingent on how that goes. So they have the space, they have the opportunity, barring... the midfield is almost inarguable that they'll go for somebody there next year. They'll evaluate this, and then they'll evaluate, Harry Maguire as well as Luke Shaw, basically, to see what they're going to do about that next season. But they've left themselves a lot of space. On paper, if this team is healthy and can get into form, I think it's fucking good. I think it's very strong, and I think that it has good depth too. When you look at options, Rasmus Højlund, Amad Diallo, either of them could be the starter instead of the backup, right? Potentially even over on the left, you could swap one of them. Mason Mount, we'll see. I think that's where you're lacking in depth is in the midfield for sure. Lenny Yoro coming into that is not Lenny Yoro and Harry Maguire being your backups is incredible to me. Dallo and Mazraoui looks great. So few question marks, but on paper, an incredibly strong team that can progress. And a lot of these players will get better over time. So very excited for that. But United also do have the PSR space to move forward in the future and have done incredible work. So watch my video on that if you want to see why and how much space we might have next summer. And also why Champions League is so important too. Okay, that's what I have for today. So I'll be ready to go live and do other things, between today. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go live with the pre-match, but also the end of the window discussion, all of that for anything that's still happening. Maybe announcements at that time. So Ugarte and Scott, all good. Might happen after McTominay signs. That could be today. That could be early tomorrow. Jadon Sancho, it's all on the table. My assessment is that maybe more likely stays at this point, but obviously that could change in an absolute heartbeat if Juventus offer that obligation, or if they just decide, let's do the Sterling swap, and there's something between Chelsea and Sterling on it. It is being considered. And then finally, that's probably it. But yeah, we kind of know even where we're heading into next summer towards completing the squad as a whole. Okay, thank you for watching today's video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. I will be live with the Real Reds Talk guys at around 7 p.m. UK today, so hope to see you there. Talk to you later. Bye.